Somewhere on every ship there's a passenger who woke up this morning and decided the crew needs help. No badge, no training, no authority whatsoever. Just a whistle, a notebook, and total certainty. They invent the rule. They enforce the rule. And then the rule meets somebody who actually works on board. Here's how that goes. 1. A man carrying 2 plates of waffles tried to walk 12 feet from the pastry counter over to the fruit trays. He got about 4 of them. An arm swung up in front of his chest like a railway gate, followed by a short, sharp chirp through somebody's teeth, the exact sound of a smoke alarm with a dying battery. "Single lane through here, sir." The arm belonged to Desmond, 62, semi-retired after 31 years dispatching city buses out of a depot in Auckland. He was wearing white cotton gloves. He was holding 2 orange plastic signal wands. He had packed those wands for a beach holiday in case a situation developed. And on the morning of day 6 of a 9-night Caribbean sailing, in his opinion, one had. He'd spent 5 mornings watching people drift between the waffle iron and the yogurt counter with no plan and no lanes. And something in him finally let go. He didn't see a breakfast room anymore. He saw an intersection with the lights out. By 20 to 7, he had sealed the port-side doorway behind a wall of stacked bread baskets and upside-down cereal bowls, then taken up his post beside the omelet station. Give a certain kind of man a room with no markings, and he will invent the markings, then appoint himself to enforce them. Anyone heading for the cold cuts got the full briefing. Down past the meats, right at the toaster, join the line where the trays come out. That is a 90-foot lap for a single boiled egg. For 55 minutes, half-asleep strangers walked it. Nobody wants to be the first passenger in maritime history cited for cutting the corner at the toaster. It came apart when a wide man in a white galley coat crossed the room carrying a 30-pound pan of steaming hash browns against traffic. "Turn it around! Turn it around!" Desmond barked, both wands over his head like he was landing a plane. The ship's food and beverage director did not stop, did not slow, and did not accept that Desmond existed. He simply kept coming, the way a ferry keeps coming. Desmond backed up fast, caught his heel on his own wall of bread baskets, and went over sideways into a 6-foot tower of decorative melons. The last traffic he ever directed was 20 honeydews rolling downhill past the omelet station. 2. Somewhere in a cruise line's billing system, there is a charge for 1 mango margarita, $21, applied to a passenger who never ordered it, never wanted it, and never got within a foot of tasting it. That is how this one finishes. It starts with a man at a shaded table near the towel station, clear sightline to the pool bar, working a golf scorecard with a stubby pencil. He was not doing a crossword. He was auditing strangers. Somebody would order at the rail and he would lock onto that glass like an air traffic controller in a thunderstorm. Where is it going? Who touches it? Did anything change hands? He noted hair colors, hat shapes, swimsuit patterns. 3.5 hours of that, squinting through clip-on shades, completely convinced he was rescuing a cruise line from a rum-based crime wave. His name was Wendell. 53, owner of a self-storage lot outside Phoenix, and the only thing he had ever been put in charge of was 40 padlocked units on a gravel yard. Nobody had asked him to do this. Nobody on that ship knew he existed. He had never been happier in his life. Here is where the whole thing came from. Wendell had boarded with one unshakable belief: the unlimited drink package was a con, and he was far too sharp to fall for it. So he paid as he went. $17 a shot for his own Mai Tais, card out every single time, wearing the face of a man signing away a kidney. And every lounger around him was full of people who had bought the package and were drinking like the bar had announced it was closing in 9 minutes. Missing out on a deal does not make a man sad. It makes him vigilant. The actual rule is simple. Your package covers your own throat and nobody else's. Bartenders watch for it quietly, and it ends in a note on an account and a polite word later. Nobody drafts passengers into the enforcement side. Wendell drafted himself. At 20 past 3, he cracked his big case. A guy in a washed-out fishing shirt bought 2 blended mango margaritas, carried them to a lounger, and handed one to the woman he was traveling with. Wendell was out of his chair before the second glass touched the armrest. No greeting, no question. He walked up, took the cold, sweating cup straight out of her hand, and announced that he was reporting them both for sharing a package. She sat there with her fingers still curled around the shape of it. Her husband was built roughly like a garage door. He lowered his sunglasses and tried to work out what he had just watched happen. Wendell wasn't waiting around for a defense. He carried the seized margarita to the bar, set it on the counter like evidence at a murder trial, and demanded both of their accounts be frozen and investigated. The bartender looked at the cup, then past Wendell, at the very large man now crossing the deck. Then he tapped the register screen and delivered the flattest sentence ever spoken on that deck. "That gentleman has no package, sir. He paid cash for both of those about 5 minutes ago. $34. You have just taken a drink out of a stranger's wife's hand." 1 second, Wendell is an investigator. The next, he is a man who mugged a woman for a frozen fruit drink in front of 40 witnesses in swimwear. The husband arrived and said nothing whatsoever, which is the most frightening thing a very large man can do. Wendell tried to slide the melting cup back across the counter, mumbling about maritime policy and an honest mistake. The husband didn't want the melted one. He wanted a fresh one. The bartender was thrilled to help. New glass, top-shelf tequila, an extra pour, salt on the rim, carried over and put in the wife's hand personally. Then he printed the check and slid it down the bar. Wendell signed it without lifting his eyes, walked off toward the elevators, and dropped the scorecard full of strangers' hat descriptions into a bin on the way. For the rest of the week, he kept paying 1 drink at a time, and by the last night, the man who was too smart for the package had spent more than the package would have cost him. 3. The note came under the door of cabin 612, on the 5th morning of an 11-night sailing. 2 days overdue on a paperback Western. A fee had been applied. Payment accepted in unused coffee cards, in person before noon. Signed, Reading Room Administration. There is no reading room administration. There is no ship's librarian either, not on that vessel and not on almost any other. The little shelf of books on a cruise ship is nobody's job. Guest services tops it up with whatever passengers abandon in their cabins, and that is the entire department. Which explains what happened on day 3, when a young guy reached for a battered thriller and got stopped mid-reach by a woman with a pen. Full name, cabin number, and who you were traveling with. He gave her all of it. It was 10 past 8 in the morning. She had a table, a pen, and a straight face, and that is the whole recipe. 72 hours, she told him. After that, a late fee goes on your account. Her name was Loretta. 66 years old, 31 of them behind the service desk at a car dealership, 8 months retired and visibly unwell with boredom. She had dragged a side table across the doorway that morning and sat down behind it like the shift had been assigned to her. On the table lay a hardcover guest book from the gift shop, the kind people buy for weddings, ruled into columns by hand with a straight edge. And the thing she was defending with all this was a windowless box on deck 4, wedged between a supply closet and a stairwell. 4 shelves of sun-bleached thrillers, a world atlas from 1998, and 2 jigsaw puzzles missing enough pieces to qualify as a practical joke. By day 5, it was a functioning institution. Silent hours from 2 until 4, posted on an index card in block capitals. A chrome stanchion and a rope walked over from the photo gallery and strung across the entrance like the door of a nightclub. Anyone arriving during silent hours got sent away. Then came the part that finished her. Loretta worked out that if the reading room was hers, then every book on that ship was her stock, and stock does not wander around unsupervised. So she left the desk and took the job outdoors. She patrolled the loungers on the pool deck, reading spines over people's shoulders and checking titles against her guest book. On the morning of day 8, she found something big. A man in a pale blue shirt at a shaded table near the bar, working through a fat ring binder of plastic-sleeved pages, not in her book. Sitting there in plain sight. Loretta marched over, pressed a round orange price sticker onto the cover, and informed him the material was being taken into the Deck 4 collection. She took hold of the corner and pulled. It did not move. He raised his head slowly, wearing the expression of a man who has just been handed a parking ticket by a seagull. He was the ship's environmental compliance officer. The binder was the official inspection record for the vessel's waste and water systems, due in front of a port inspector the next morning. Loretta, fully committed to a position that had never existed, told him he was interfering with an official inventory check and that she would be calling security. He didn't argue. He lifted his radio and asked security to walk the lady from Deck 4 back to her cabin, gently. The rope was back at the photo gallery inside the hour. The guest book went out with the recycling. The doorway went back to being a doorway. For the last 3 days of that sailing, passengers kept noticing the same woman slowing down as she passed the room, looking in, saying nothing at all. 4. You go to the bathroom. You are gone, maybe 10 minutes. You come back, and your book is gone, your sunglasses are gone, your phone is gone, and there's an orange price sticker on the chair frame with the time written on it in ballpoint. Your things are in the used towel cart. All of them. Wet. That was the work of the Hartleys, a married pair in their early 70s from Alberta, who had appointed themselves the deck chair enforcement division of a ship that never asked for one. Their position? The cruise line had gone soft on lounger hogs, and somebody had to step up. 6:30 in the morning, both of them in position on Deck 9. He carried a kitchen timer clipped to his belt. She carried a roll of orange price stickers, the kind you see at a garage sale. Towel and a book on a chair with no human attached. Sticker on the frame. Time written on. Clock running. 9 minutes. That was the grace period, invented by the two of them and applied to 4,000 strangers who never knew it existed. At minute 10, Mrs. Hartley moved in and swept the chair clean. Phones, hats, paperbacks, reading glasses, one slowly deflating inflatable killer whale. All of it went into the towel cart while she muttered about people who don't respect a shared resource. No shouting, no arguing, just two people working a checklist the way meter readers work a street. By 11:30 on the second sea day, there was a small mountain beside that cart. 9 paperbacks, 5 pairs of expensive sunglasses, a heap of flip-flops, 3 bottles of tanning oil, and a portable speaker still playing to nobody. Make a free thing feel scarce, and perfectly reasonable, adults will build a legal system around it inside 2 days. The Hartleys just added stationery. Their careers ended at 20-1, when the two of them wandered off to the grill for cheeseburgers. They left towels, books, and sandals on their chairs to hold their spots, which is, word for word, the offense they had been prosecuting since sunrise. The burger line was slow. They were gone 11 minutes. Both loungers were bare when they came back. 1 orange sticker on each frame, time written on in ballpoint. 2 chairs down, a man in his 50s was working a crossword beside a soda cup the size of a fire bucket. He had watched them all morning and learned their rules better than they had. Mrs. Hartley's woven beach bag, Mr. Hartley's prescription sunglasses and both of their paperbacks were already in the towel cart, confiscated on schedule at minute 10. He never looked up. 5. That whole row's cold. I wouldn't put money in it. The man saying this to strangers on Deck 5 did not work for the casino. He didn't work for the cruise line or anyone else on the water. He was Preston, 30, and he had told half the dining room he was a data guy in supply chain analytics, which in his mind qualified him to run a casino floor. By day 2 of the sailing, Preston had decided he had cracked the ship's slot software. He had not, obviously. But put a confident man with a vocabulary in a room full of holiday makers, and it takes a shocking amount of time for anyone to stop him. He set up near the big progressive machines and worked the aisle like a trading floor he personally supervised. Somebody would walk up with a folded 10, ready to lose it in peace, and there he would be with his palm out. The cycle already fired this afternoon, he would say. tapping his smartwatch like it was feeding him live numbers. You'd just be donating. Most people looked him over, decided he was a staff member having a difficult week, and wandered off to find a blackjack table. Talking wasn't enough for Preston. If people would not respect his findings, he would make the machines physically unusable. He cleaned out the bar for cardboard coasters and built careful little towers over every spin button on every machine he had personally sentenced to death. 2 solid hours of that, pacing the aisle, muttering about payout percentages and exposure, single-handedly shutting down about 1/3 of a working casino. Nobody stopped him, mostly because nobody could work out what he believed he was doing. That whole room runs on the idea that a machine has moods, hot streaks, and bad afternoons. It has none of those. It has a chip picking numbers thousands of times a second, whether anyone is sitting there or not. Preston's career ended around 9 that night, when 3 women in their 70s came through the doorway with glasses of Prosecco, laughing at something nobody else could hear over the noise. They were from a small town in Portugal and spoke no English at all. Preston stepped in front of them anyway, waved proudly at his coaster fortifications, and delivered a full technical briefing on probability. The one in the middle listened for about 9 seconds, smiled, and patted his forearm the way you calm a nervous dog. Then she walked around him. She picked the exact machine he had spent the most breath condemning, sat down, swept his tower off the button with the back of her hand, and fed in a 50. Preston folded his arms and leaned on a pillar to watch the lesson land. One press of the button. The screen went gold, the machine locked up, and every siren in that corner of the ship went off at once. $7,600 on a single spin. Her friends screamed. The casino host came jogging over with a clipboard and a handshake. Preston picked his coasters up off the carpet one at a time and stacked them back on the bar where he found them. By 10 o'clock, there was a line of people waiting for the row he had condemned. 6. The man in the faded blue boiler suit had been awake since 4. He had a scuffed orange tool bag in one hand, a radio at his collar, and 30 steps to go. Then a stranger in a khaki vest with 14 pockets took hold of his shoulder and asked to see his group number. This was the tender stairwell on Deck 3 in Kotor, 8:30 in the morning. And the man doing the asking did not work for the cruise line or anybody else on that water. His name was Barry, he was 64, from Winnipeg, and he had decided the crew were scanning tender tickets far too casually. The ship's own podium stood 6 inches behind him, 2 officers and a scanner, which meant 400 people going ashore that morning were being processed twice, once by the ship and once by a retired man with strong feelings about queuing. He stopped people mid-step to ask where they were going and why, jabbing at them with a folded port map. Snorkel trip? Real chop out there today. Weak stomachs to the right, please. Tenders run on a timetable, 6 or 7 runs slotted tight against each other, and a minute lost at the bottom of those stairs lands on the last boat of the day. Barry, unpaid, had put the morning about 1/3 behind, which brings us back to the shoulder he was holding. Walk-ons not permitted, he explained. Numbered group cards only. That was the procedure now. The man stopped. He lifted Barry's hand off like a coat off a hook and looked at him with the eyes of somebody 4 hours into a 14-hour shift. He didn't produce a ticket. He didn't argue. He stepped into the boat, dropped into the driver's seat, and reached for the public address microphone. Any boarding questions this morning? See Barry? He told the peer. Barry's helping us today. He'll check all 400 tickets by hand while I go and have my breakfast. Then he climbed off his own boat, pressed a clipboard into Barry's hands, and walked away up the gangway. 400 sunburnt people turned to look at the man who had spent 40 minutes telling them he was in charge. The first question came from the front, and it was about return times. Barry looked down at the clipboard. It was a crew duty roster and nothing else. 7. 60 grown adults in evening dress did exactly what the woman on the 3rd step told them to do, and not one of them asked who she was. She wasn't crew. She was a passenger in a champagne-colored jumpsuit with a glass of Prosecco in her left hand, and her rule was 4 seconds a group. 4 seconds to get up there, arrange your faces and clear off, enforced with 2 sharp claps on the beat. This was formal night on the promenade of an enormous ship. 4 decks of glass overhead and 1 grand staircase built for no reason except so passengers can stand halfway up it in a tuxedo. A queue had formed at the bottom, and it was a good queue. Slow, cheerful, everybody letting everybody else go first, because nobody aboard had anywhere to be. That was the problem. Rhonda was 47 and had spent 18 years running conference logistics in Baltimore. And 18 years does not switch off because you packed a swimsuit. There is a particular fault in people who live on deadlines. Take the deadlines away and something in the wiring starts screaming. So they build a schedule out of nothing and hand it to strangers. She took the 3rd step, planted her feet, and assumed control of the whole atrium. When a family of 5 tried to line themselves up, tallest to shortest, she walked into their photograph and waved the entire idea away. Arranging yourselves, in her professional opinion, was where the delay came from. And it worked, which is the maddening part. 25 minutes, 60 people in gowns and dinner jackets, all moving on her word. Nobody ever checks. Say a thing loudly enough in the right voice, and a crowd decides somebody must have hired you, even while you are visibly holding a drink. What ended it was a young couple who reached the center step at about 9 o'clock. The man in the dinner jacket reached into his inside pocket and began, very carefully, to lower himself onto one knee. 60 people worked out what was happening at the same second and went silent, stepping back to open up the shot. Rhonda saw a man crouching in her frame and running over his allotted time. She came down 2 steps, made a hurry-up circle with one finger, and announced at full volume that if his shoe needed tying, he could do it out of shot because his turn was over. He stayed where he was, on one knee. Small velvet box in his hand, looking up at her. 60 heads turned toward Rhonda, and every single face arrived at the same expression. It took about 2 seconds to strip her of a job she had held for 25 minutes. She lowered her hands, said something nobody caught about keeping things moving, and walked very fast in the direction of the casino. The man proposed. She heard none of it. Her Prosecco stayed on the 3rd step for the rest of the night, which is a good deal longer than she ever let anybody else stand there. 8. She had the notes typed and printed before she ever boarded. 40 of them in a folder packed in with the sun hats. Diane was 63, 19 years of running a credit union branch behind her, and she had worked out in advance what the self-service laundry on deck 8 was going to need. Discipline. Those 2 quiet minutes everybody allows everybody else, between a machine finishing and its owner turning up, struck her as the precise point where standards let go. So she took the room. She stood in the middle of that warm, soapy little space with a roll of 40-gallon trash bags and watched the countdown numbers. 15 seconds past 0, she moved. Wet clothes out of the drum, into a sack onto the folding table, printed note on top explaining a procedure nobody had ever agreed to. And there is nobody to appeal to. A ship's laundry has no attendant, no supervisor, and no desk. 4 machines, 3,000 passengers, and an honor system, which is why it is the tensest room on any vessel afloat. Diane moved into the vacuum and started issuing paperwork. On the 4th morning, she cleared a drum that had just hit 0, scooped out an armful of black sequined something, and dumped it on a chair to make space for her sundresses, a tailcoat, 3 dress shirts, 2 pairs of velvet trousers. It belonged to the ship's headline illusionist who had gone for a coffee 6 minutes earlier and came back to find his entire act in a sack. He didn't shout. He didn't call guest services. He said nothing at all, which should have worried her far more than it did, and then he waited for the afternoon she left her own load spinning and went up for lunch. She came back, opened the dryer, took hold of the hem of the yellow one, and pulled. Out came the yellow dress, tied to a green dress, tied to a linen blouse, tied to a cardigan, tied to another dress. and it kept coming until 30 feet of her wardrobe lay across the floor in one rope. Every knot had been tied by a man who ties knots for a living, which means every one of them pulled tighter the harder she fought it. 2.5 hours she sat on that folding table working them apart, one at a time, while the rest of the deck did their washing around her in peace. That night, he closed his show in velvet trousers, still damp at the knee, looking delighted about it. 9. An hour before the show, the front 3 rows of the theater were roped off with floral scarves tied across the armrests. The crew had nothing to do with it. 18 seats, held by a woman standing at the end of the aisle with her arms folded, working the door of a nightclub that did not exist. Denise was 52, a regional sales director from Nebraska, and 11 days earlier, she had crossed into the second lowest tier of the cruise line's loyalty program. A group of friends came down with nachos and made for row 3. Denise stepped into their path and held up her room card like a badge. The lower orchestra, she explained, was for loyalty guests only. There is no such rule. There never has been on that ship or any other ship on any ocean, and nothing on Earth stops anybody from sitting in row 1 except what time they turn up. She asked to see their cruise cards anyway, spotted the marking that flagged them as first-timers, gave them the warm smile of a woman doing them a favor, and pointed them at the balcony. Over the next half hour, she cleared 19 people out of the front rows, quoting a seating regulation she had written herself in her head that afternoon. Every one of them apologized to her on the way out. 6 days into a holiday, nobody has the appetite for a fight about a chair, and she had worked that out on day 1. Here is what a differently colored key card does to certain people. It does not register as a small laundry discount and a free glass of sparkling wine. It registers as a rank. And a rank, once you believe you hold one, has to be used on somebody. 8 minutes before the house lights went down, a man in a plain gray t-shirt carrying a bottle of water walked past her, stepped over a scarf, and sat down in the middle of row 1. Denise came down that aisle at speed. She tapped him on the shoulder and delivered the speech she had been polishing all evening, the one about who the front rows belonged to, finishing with an instruction to move. He looked up, mildly puzzled, and asked whether she was with the stage crew. Denise told him she held loyalty status and that somebody had to keep order. He nodded, took that in, stood up, walked up the side steps onto the stage, and picked up a microphone that was very much switched on. He was the headline comedian for that sailing, halfway through his sound check, with 1,100 seats filling up behind her. His voice came out of every speaker in the building. Big hand, please, for Denise in row 1. Denise has kindly offered to stay behind afterwards and pick up everybody's cups. 1,100 people laughed at once. A stagehand came along and untied her scarves, folding each one neatly, and handed the pile back to her without comment. And Denise stayed in that seat. Of course she did. Getting up and leaving row 1 would have meant 1,100 people watching her go. 10. A man in his 70s was pulled over on the jogging track for walking too slowly. There is no minimum speed on deck 15 in either lane at any hour. The whistle belonged to Ivonne, 59, 34 years of teaching physical education in Sacramento, packed the way other passengers pack a hat. What set her off was the white line down the middle of the track and the loose attitude everybody aboard was taking toward it. At 20 past 6 in the morning, she took the tightest bend of the circuit in a full lilac velour tracksuit and began enforcing it. A young couple holding hands drifted a few inches over the paint and got a blast in the face and a lecture on lane discipline. A group of women in matching bachelorette pajamas were waved off the deck entirely for wearing the wrong shoes. Then came the holding area. 2 loungers turned to face the sea, where offenders sat for 90 seconds and considered their choices. Several of them actually sat. Here is the thing about that white line. It is paint. The shipyard laid it down so the deck would look like a track. It appears in no rulebook and no policy anywhere aboard, and no officer has ever enforced it in the history of the company. 34 years of bells and timetables, though, do not switch off because somebody sold you a cruise. What Ivonne had no plan for was 6 men who don't stop. They came around the bend shoulder to shoulder, at the pace of people who do this every morning, because they do. The ship's firefighting team, off duty, working through their cardio. Ivonne stepped into the lane and put up a flat palm, the way you halt a line of schoolchildren, drawing breath for a speech about running side by side. The formation opened into 2 columns, went past her on both sides without losing a step, and closed up again. The man on the end reached across as he came level and took the whistle out from between her teeth, still running. She stood on the rubber with her lips still shaped around it, blowing a short, furious breath at nobody. 20 seconds later, a woman with a coffee cut clean across the white line in front of her and kept walking. The pattern isn't rudeness. It's the moment a person decides a rule they invented in their own head now applies to everybody else on board. Genuine question. Should crew shut this down the second it starts? Or is letting it collapse on its own the better punishment? Tell me below, like the video, and subscribe for more.